What's going on, guys? TG or ThunderGod here with a pretty interesting video. Today I will be doing a video idea from New Horizons. He did give me permission. RIP. He's not dead. He's good. I don't know why I said that. But this is going to be his power ranking series. The series will be split up into 3 videos. Part 1, early to mid Shippuden, and then 5 Kage Summit to the end of the series, where I'll be ranking the top 10 characters from arc to arc based on the information we have at the time. Basically, we just don't have access to future intel until we actually get to that arc in the timeline. So if I say A character is stronger than B character for this reason, but this is just explained later on, we don't have that explanation. So A character being stronger than B character is still fine with the context that we have currently. It should be pretty clear, but a lot of these arguments are probably going to be flawed in the grand scheme of like the Naruto universe, but would fit in like a part 1 only context. I will also be using the data books. Now, the data books can be used, but the way I'm kind of structuring it, I'm going to be keeping it to where the data books can only be used if they say something within the confines of the arc. If character A is stated to be stronger than character B in data book 1, which covers chapters 1 through 119, this statement in question must exist or reference events during that arc. So a statement referencing something in the Chūnin Exams can't be used in the Land of Waves, even if it still exists in data book 1. The data books are usually pretty clear on this, as an image usually accompanies these types of depictions, but I'm simply doing this for transparency's sake, as I kind of want to include all information. The last little bit is characters like Iruka, Ibisu, with no real statements or inferences will not really be included, as we have literally nothing to go off of until later on, where Iruka shows ceiling that can assist in holding down Sage Mode Naruto, or Ibisu who throws down with the Naraka path. This will also extend to summons and certain other characters that I'll probably address later on. That's it for now. I'm not going to address this in each one of the videos, but these are probably going to be longer videos that get longer, part 1's kind of okay, but as I go into Shippuden and late Shippuden, it's gonna get pretty crazy. So just more so like we all get familiar, we're all good, hunky-dory. All right, let's get into the video. I'm gonna shut the fuck up. Starting off with the Land of Waves arc, ranging from chapters 9 through 33. Starting at number 1, we have the 4th Hokage, or Minato. Granted, like, Minato hasn't been name dropped until Kakashi Gaiden. I'm just gonna call him Minato. Minato is described as the village hero that stopped the Nine Tails attack. Chapter 1 literally notes how he defeated the Nine Tails. It's also stated that the Hokage is the strongest shinobi in the village, with Minato during this time frame being Hokage. Even while Hiruzen, for example, is still alive, his placement at number 1 should just be really self-explanatory. At number 2 spot, we have Hiruzen. Hokage is just stated the strongest shinobi in the village. Pretty self-explanatory stuff. Also noted to have mastered 1000 illusionary arts or ninjutsu. This is mentioned by Ibisu, which is also kind of mixed in with Kakashi, which I'll mention in a second, but it just kind of does seem to be like a Hokage level feat or something to that extent. At the number 3 spot, we have Haku. Haku is a noted prodigy and user of the ice style Kekkei Genkai, or Hoiton, someone whose potential is only rivaled by the likes of Naruto and Sasuke in the data books, only these 3 having a latent potential of 5. Haku is stated off his lore as a tracker nin to be stronger than Kakashi. It doesn't matter that Haku isn't actually a tracker nin, as he did kill one and his skills convinced Kakashi that he's strong enough to fit the profile. We also know that Haku shouldn't really be held down by his feats against Naruto and Sasuke, as he's noted to be slowing down via using large amounts of chakra to maintain his ice mirrors. This, in tandem with the fact that he was holding back against Naruto and Sasuke, pretty much, in my opinion, makes it so his feats during that fight don't really transfer over. Like Sasuke reacting to Haku, is it like that's a fatigued version of Haku that's holding back? You know what I mean? Haku is also just stated to be stronger than Zabuza, who notes that even if you defeat me if you can, you still won't have what it takes to kill Haku. Giving a pretty big implication that Haku just is his superior or is stronger. This kind of supplemented afterwards, where Zabuza notes that Haku is able to analyze the battle with Kakashi and be the one to come up with the Sharingan countermeasures. Haku also being stronger than Kakashi is pretty consistent, especially when you consider the fact that he had taken a beating from KN0 Naruto, or like the version of Naruto like exploding with QB chakra. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm not having Naruto's QB variants on these lists. I'm going to just keep it to base Naruto. If I was counting the QB Naruto, he would take this spot right here, because his chakra level skyrocketed so much that Kakashi and Zabuza were mistaking Naruto for each other in the Hidden Mist. So he's not weak, along with the data book supplementing the fact that the QB's power allowed him to overcome Haku's Kekkei Genkai. So the excuse that Haku can't be stronger than Kakashi because he lost to Naruto doesn't really work, because this Naruto is like a weird outlier version that's insanely strong, to the point point that he's probably stronger than other variations of QB Naruto that we see later on in the series. But in the context of this arc, yeah, Naruto would also just be stronger than Kakashi, Zabuza, Haku, everybody on the bridge. So, I mean, it's kind of like Kishimoto hadn't really figured out the power system yet, and you got to give him a little bit of slack on that. But it just kind of, you know, it's not really a big anti-feat or anything like that. Haku also showing the ability to intercept Kakashi's Raikiri, which the data book notes is his ultimate secret technique. This interception feat gets a little crazier when you consider the fact that Haku was able to throw Senbon at the scroll past Kakashi's feet before Kakashi could really notice it, kind of implying that he just blitzed Kakashi's Sharingan with the Senbon here. This being done after Kakashi had already started moving and Haku had just appeared out of the ice mirror in front of Kakashi. So he's able to throw the Senbon, hit the scroll, and intercept Kakashi all in the short time frame after Kakashi had started moving. Pretty crazy stuff. Haku being stronger really shouldn't be an inconsistency or surprising to that many people. Next up, we have Kakashi. This one should just be pretty self-explanatory. Kakashi of the Sharingan, being noted along the Hokage, has copied more than 1,000 jutsu, brought up first by Bisu, and then later on by Sakura again in the first Zabuza fight. Data book 1 notes Kakashi is just outright the strongest shinobi in Konoha, obviously excluding the Hokage, along with just having a 2-0 record against Zabuza. Granted, Zabuza does perform well against Kakashi. Part of this is due to Zabuza's use of silent killing, which he does immediately against Kakashi in both fights and is a natural counter to the Sharingan. This on top of the fact that Kakashi gets caught in the water bubble, mostly due to Zabuza appearing in front of Tazuna and Team 7, which did kind of throw Kakashi off where they have a bit of a shadow clone. Oh, I knew you weren't the real one, back and forth. I think Zabuza is threatening to Kakashi, and Kakashi does make a note of this and Zabuza's strength, but the fact that Zabuza did kind of spin the block back on Kakashi, even with prep and a new strategy given to him by Haku, still just loses to more of Kakashi's latent abilities, like the summoning jutsu and the dogs that track down Zabuza in the mist via the use of Kakashi's blood, which they sniffed out on Zabuza, on top of the fact that Raikiri was obviously just too much for Zabuza, him even noting that Kakashi's chakra being visible is something insane to him. I don't think number 4 really requires too much explanation. It's pretty clear. We don't really have that many Jonin to compare Kakashi to. Next up at number 5, we have Zabuza, the Demon of the Mist, noted to be on a whole other level than the Demon Brothers, with Kakashi remarking the next threat is surely going to be Jonin level. Zabuza is presented as a problem. This is demonstrated via Sasuke's fear and awe at the intensity of 2 Jonin facing each other. You can get a sense for this as Zabuza is somebody who forces Kakashi to use his Sharingan and actually does catch him lacking in their initial encounter, catching him in a water bubble. Zabuza's use of silent killing, which for those who aren't aware, or I kind of brushed over that, I guess I might explain it here, is essentially where Zabuza's in the hidden mist and you can't really detect his movements, which also makes it for the Sharingan to counter the physical movements of Zabuza or kind of get the precog that's noted as kinetic vision where Kakashi can see his upcoming moves. Zabuza's placement is the most blatant. Kakashi just beat him twice, putting him under a Genjutsu and was about to kill him with Raikiri, or, you know, when he didn't do that, he just beat Zabuza down physically, and Haku being above that as he stated stronger than both of these people and has the feats to back it up. At the number 6 spot, we have 1 to 1.5 Tomoe Sasuke, who is the top Genin of the Hidden Leaf. This should be pretty easy since Sasuke's reserves were monstrous even for a Genin who shouldn't even have enough chakra to perform ninjutsu, at least to the point of the bell test. Like, Kakashi's very surprised he can perform a fireball. Sasuke's growth during this arc is pretty substantial. He gains a power boost via awakening the Sharingan, as it's noted that when ninja awaken their Kekkei Genkai, they just get stronger. We see Sasuke just drag the 2 Chūnin from the hidden mist in the form of the Demon Brothers. Post chakra control training, Sasuke shot up even further, going from getting dragged from Zabuza's water clones to being able to take down 8 to 9 of them. It might actually be 10. So if you actually look at the panel where Sasuke takes down the Zabuza clones, you see 6 on screen, but then if you actually start counting the silhouettes in the background, it seems that it's closer to 9 to 10. I actually may lean towards 10 since the water clones that Zabuza sent towards Sasuke are noted to have a 10th of his strength. The reason I also lean towards 10th is because the water clones in the data book are noted to have the same taijutsu as Zabuza himself. So you're kind of conceding that either Sasuke can just bulldoze 10 people with the same taijutsu abilities as the original Zabuza, or because Zabuza made more clones, the actual taijutsu abilities and strength were diminished to 1/10, hence 10 clones. So it's 8 to 9, but it's still a pretty insane feat considering what Sasuke was doing before. You know, he wasn't even relevant, and now he's just confidently taking down Zabuza's water clones. He does better than Naruto pre-QB against Haku. He's eventually able to just start reading Haku's movements. It was acclimating to his slowing movements over time. So him being above Naruto, is it really, you know, self-explanatory? Again, Sasuke's placement's pretty firm. You can't really argue him higher. This is just the max place. But yeah, Sasuke by the end of Land of Waves should be at the number 6 spot. At number 7, we have Naruto. Again, pretty self-explanatory, should be pretty comparable to base Sasuke, as they do almost the same during the chakra control training and tree climbing exercise. This on top of the fact that Naruto's shadow clones can just allow him to pretty much bulldoze everybody below him, I think just makes this placement pretty clear. Again, if you were going to give Naruto the Kyuubi chakra, he would just shoot up above Haku and everybody on this list would move down one, but I'm not, so I think Naruto's placement is pretty self-explanatory. At 8 and 9, we have the Demon Brothers. For future points, I'm going to actually be putting multiple people in the same number if it's close enough. Literally for lack of characters, I'm just going to have the Demon Brothers be 8 and 9. It doesn't really matter whichever one you think is stronger. They essentially made the C rank mission go up to an expensive B rank mission. They didn't, they kind of got jobbed by base Sasuke. Their only real competition, in my opinion, is just Sakura post-chakra control training, who is somebody that Kakashi can trust to guard Tazuna from maybe future assailants or more shinobi thrown at him. But realistically, Kakashi also thought Zabuza wasn't going to be recovered in that short of a time frame anyway. And Sakura's feats in this arc don't really indicate that she's that much above Naruto and Sasuke. Yes, she has better chakra control, but that doesn't mean she's stronger. The best argument I could see for maybe Sakura is that she's able to somewhat physically react to the Demon Brothers, but it's kind of like a sloppy reaction feat, and even then, like, I don't really know what she was gonna do in that situation. I don't think there's enough for Sakura post chakra control training to actually justify her being a base Sasuke rival at the beginning of the show. So for that reason, 8, 9, and 10 are the Demon Brothers, interchangeable, and then number 10 slot is Sakura. So our top 10 for the Land of Waves is Minato, Hiruzen, Haku, Kakashi, Zabuza, Sasuke, Naruto, the Demon Brothers, and Sakura. Side note, if I wanted to throw the Ninetales on here, he'd probably be number 1, and then everybody would move down one. I'm not, but just a side note. Next up, we have the Chūnin Exams ranging from chapters 34 to 114. I'll also pretty much just be using the rest of Data Book 1 now, as Data Book 1 ranges from chapters 1 through 119. So just an FYI on that. At the number 1 spot, we have Minato again, and he remains at this placement just due to the fact that, on top of the reasons previously mentioned, there's more supporting evidence that's dropped for him. Pretty much, Hiruzen outright states that none of the shinobi in Konoha right now are of any real threat to Orochimaru, going as far as to throw himself in the mix, noting that he doubts even he could face Orochimaru. This is relevant due to how Anko follows this up with "if only the 4th Hokage were still alive," insinuating that Minato would, if Minato was alive, they wouldn't be having this problem, or Orochimaru really wouldn't be as threatening to the village, insinuating that Minato is just above Hiruzen and Orochimaru altogether, or at the very least is just somebody capable of stopping Orochimaru outright. So Minato's position doesn't really change, just kind of extra factors that put him above Hiruzen, Orochimaru, and the Sannin in general. At the number 2 spot, we have Orochimaru and Jiraiya. These two are just interchangeable, so they share the number 2 spot. Orochimaru's placement may seem weird, but you have to recall that we haven't seen Hiruzen and Orochimaru fight, and at this point, the only information we have to compare Hiruzen and Orochimaru is just Hiruzen's own self-admission that he doesn't believe he'd be able to face Orochimaru, which does seem to indicate that in his mind, currently, Oro is just a tier above him, with somebody he just wouldn't be able to take down. The first data book also continues this train of thought, or like this idea or narrative under Orochimaru when talking about him, and it notes that he is powerful enough to clearly state that he's superior to the 3rd Hokage. This, coupled with the fact that Orochimaru outright just, like, the aura he puts on Kakashi is crazy. At the prospect of fighting Orochimaru, Kakashi saw his own decapitation, which is insane. It doesn't really stop there, because Orochimaru scares Kakashi so much that he makes him do an out-of-character move, which is use Raikiri without the Sharingan. Like, he never does that, but Orochimaru scared him so much that he just had to do it, you know what I'm saying? Which it's just kind of interesting. So Orochimaru, on top of having the Hokage doubt his ability to beat him, just makes the strongest shinobi in Konoha just look like a child. Jiraiya's placement is solely due to a couple different statements. Even though we haven't seen what Jiraiya can do, we know he isn't in the village when Hiruzen's statement of being the strongest in the village is referenced. He's traveling. He's not an active participant in Konoha. Ibisu remarks that only with the help of another from the grade 3 because they actually defeat Orochimaru, which again is kind of crazy considering that, he's taught Hokage candidates before. He doesn't even have that much confidence in Hiruzen to do it. Data book 1 also just putting Jiraiya on Orochimaru's level. He is a powerful person on par with Orochimaru, pretty much making it that Orochimaru is probably the greater of the two, but they're really just both sharing this tier because of these statements and narratives pushed. And Hiruzen's like strongest in the village statement doesn't really give him a pass against any of these opponents. At the number 3 spot, we have Hiruzen. Again, Hiruzen remains here for a lot of the same reasons. The fact he himself doesn't think he can face Orochimaru is just pretty good stock. Not really too much to say here. At the number 4 spot, we have another tie, this being Kakashi and Kabuto. I have Kakashi above Haku now just due to him training and regaining his strength, as he knows he's allowed his body to get weak while he's doing rock climbing training. While this doesn't objectively put him a tier above Haku in all probability, it just means that you can start arguing there's a difference between the Kakashi that we see in the Land of Waves and later variations. Kakashi training his body isn't insignificant, as the physical energies or physical constitution of an individual is half the mock-up of what makes an individual's chakra, that being the culmination of physical and mental energies. This is in line with the explanation that Kakashi gives to Team 7, where you can literally train your body, raise your muscle mass, get beefy to get stronger. Kabuto is a bit of a different story, as we do see him have a direct interaction with Kakashi where it's implied or displayed that he kind of got the better end of Kakashi during that interaction. This is being done via the use of Kabuto's dead soul technique, which temporarily causes a corpse's heart to beat again, allowing Kabuto to maneuver it around with chakra. Although this can be seen as more of an IQ thing, along with the technique kind of fundamentally countering some of Kakashi's later hacks, like erasing body odor, when we know later on that Kakashi's sense of smell is just absolutely cracked, something Hiruzen also utilizes. This being more of Orochimaru's assessment of how Kabuto is no stronger than Kakashi after witnessing Kakashi's Raikiri. Even if you say that isn't more of Kakashi's, like, you know, that isn't Kakashi's full power, it still is more of his latent ability that most people probably have seen or can fight against. This relativity is supplemented even further, as Kakashi notes, at this rate I'll be obsolete soon, in response to Kabuto kind of outdoing him, which doesn't inherently mean that he's above him in strength, but can just mean that Kabuto is someone young who's approaching or on a similar tier to Kakashi's level, which will make Kakashi irrelevant, as Kabuto is just a younger individual with a similar level of strength. This is further pushed in the first fan book, where it talks about painfully aware for the need for greater strength. Kakashi has been rock climbing, retraining his body, which directly references the scene not with Orochimaru but with Kakashi, like saying he's obsolete in response to Kabuto. So his whole rock training exercise is in response to Kabuto in actuality, which means that he thinks maybe he could bridge the gap with a little bit of training between the two, but not to the point where he can overcome someone like Orochimaru or anybody on that level. I do have Kakashi in front of Kabuto, just like if I were gonna, like, I'm putting them next to each other, but I have Kakashi in front just due to the fact we've seen more of his arsenal. But just generally, yeah, they're both very interchangeable at this point, even though we haven't seen most of Kabuto's abilities. Kakashi's stock also just goes up in the first fan book with additional statements like him being stated among the most powerful ninja in the village, while showing his out of character Raikiri against Orochimaru. So Kabuto is directly bouncing off of this as well. At the number 5 spot, we have Haku. This spot exists for the same reason as it was before. The only difference here that I mentioned is that Kakashi training potentially going stronger than the benchmark he set Haku at, which again may not put him a tier above, but I think there's enough there to suggest, like, you know, a placemate could change. But Haku being stronger than beginning of part 1 Kakashi is still really good stock for putting him above a lot of people in the leaf. Next up, we have Guy. Now this is a little weird because it's like, okay, hold off on just saying Guy can use up to like the 6th or 7th gate in part 1, I think 7th, as like a win condition, because we don't know. We know he probably can do the gate since he taught them to lead, but hold off on that for just a sec. Let's talk about some of the actual stuff. Guy has questionable statements, as Sasuke's statement about Guy being faster than Kakashi, or believing Guy at face value at his, you know, claim or boast of being stronger than Kakashi, doesn't really work, as it's more of a knowledge claim, and Sasuke is very fallible in this aspect, as he hasn't seen more of Kakashi's latent powers, such as the Raikiri Sharingan combination or his potential dog summon. So I don't think Sasuke just saying Guy's faster than some arbitrary version of Kakashi that he saw is just absolute that base Guy is just slamming Kakashi. Or all the statements made are just too vague, barring that you think Guy could potentially use the 5th gate, which I do think he could. I think that's a fine inference you can have, but the statements surrounding Guy and Kakashi don't really indicate that Guy is stronger. Kakashi's just stated the strongest shinobi during this time frame, so I don't really see a reason Guy would be stronger. Which is also why I have him at the number 6 spot, because Haku is just also stronger than a variation of Kakashi that Guy isn't. There's just not a comfortable way to place him higher based on the information that we have. So for that reason, I have Guy at number 6. At number 7, I have Asuma. Asuma falls under a similar category, as it's just remarked in comparison to Kakashi that his true strength is near Kakashi's. Although you could say Asuma's statement is better than Gai's actually, as it's more concrete, as opposed to statements such as like thought to being near, like it's actually a more concrete statement. I do think Sasuke seeing Sharingan Kakashi is actually stock for Gai being above Asuma, and like Sasuke believing that Gai would just be stronger than Kakashi. So you could just say Gai is stronger, or in Sasuke's mind could be feasibly stronger than the versions of Kakashi he's seen fight, or Zabuza as well. I also think if you factor in the gates, there's just more implications for Gai just being stronger than Asuma, and better inferences as a whole, as we haven't seen too much from Asuma to really just give him, you know, more stock against Gai. So maybe you can argue these two can share a potential spot, but I think there's just more to argue for Gai in this situation. At number 8, we have Zabuza. I think Zabuza is pretty clear. I think Zabuza honestly can still be argued above Asuma in some cases, just due to silent killing and the hidden mist as a whole, which would be extremely threatening to most Leaf Jonin, especially if it's forcing Kakashi to use these roundabout tactics to actually catch Zabuza in the mist. It counters his Sharingan. I think it would be very effective at allowing Zabuza to actually catch some of the other Jonin off guard, especially if he's doing it against a stronger Jonin. While I do think this is all well and good, I do favor Asuma and Gai just scaling closer to Kakashi's full strength than Zabuza, who just arbitrarily was a high diff opponent for Kakashi, which isn't even like a direct one-to-one, because it was mainly Zabuza's ability that was countering Kakashi, with Kakashi actually taking a W even without that ability in their initial fight. So I think Zabuza is here for a lot of the same reasons. I think Asuma and Gai have a stronger case against him, but you know, realistically, you can maybe argue him around. This is just my placement for him. A lot of the Jonin honestly are kind of interchangeable, as you can kind of see they have similar, like it's almost equal stats because everyone's so close to a certain extent, but you kind of have to make these micro inferences. You also may be able to say like all the Jonin are somewhat relative, since it's noted that only the elite Jonin are able to break Kabuto's Genjutsu in the arena, but I don't know how much stock I could put into this when Sakura and Shikamaru were also able to break Kabuto's Genjutsu, so I don't think there's enough stock to just say like an elite Jonin also gives a pass to just like higher ranks here. Zabuza himself though should be on the Leaf Jonin level, as it's noted when a Jonin activates Jutsu, the air trembles and your blood will freeze, in reference to Kakashi during his fight with Zabuza. This being something that was touched on a little bit with Sasuke, someone who had experienced real combat against Chūnin, could barely move in the face of Jonin, and then that's taken a step further when he's confronted with an abnormal force of nature like Orochimaru. So even though I have Zabuza here, I think stylistically you could have him above Asuma, and there's cases to be made to have him a little bit higher than maybe even Kabuto. It kind of depends on how you interpret a lot of things, but I think a lot of these Jonin are actually really close to one another. It's just I can't have 7 people on one rank. Next up we have Kurenai and Anko. Now Kurenai really doesn't have anything aside from her noted Jonin rank, you know, and this is just shown as she's able to move at similar speeds to other Jonin when they go to stop Neji, or just are generally noted to be a higher caliber, being one of Konoha's elites. The databook directly notes that since she's a Jonin, all her abilities are high, but above all else, her Genjutsu ability is outstanding. Obviously, there isn't enough there to suggest she'd be above Zabuza, and the reason Anko is tied with her is due to Anko being stated once one of Orochimaru's subordinates noted the most dangerous kunoichi in all of Konoha, which doesn't inherently mean that she's just stronger than Kurenai, but also is kind of a ridiculous statement. This is a little easier to digest when you think about some of her jutsu at this point, like the Twin Snakes mutual death technique, a noted kinjutsu or forbidden jutsu taught to Anko by Orochimaru. It's activated when the caster seizes their enemy's hand and makes the hand seals together with them. Then once the sealing is complete, they both mean certain death. It's noted to be a lover's double suicide ninja art, and the fact that it seems like it would have worked on Orochimaru and he had to substitute himself with the shadow clone kind of makes sense why she's kind of tied with Kurenai. The only real reason that you can argue Kurenai is higher is just due to how, in fact, Fanbook 1 notes this, how in part 1, Tokubetsu Jonin is noted to be a rank between Chūnin and Jonin, coupled with the fact that we haven't seen enough from other Tokubetsu Jonin later on to maybe infer that, okay, maybe they're kind of outliers and this doesn't inherently like translate to strength. So I do think you can argue these two are a bit interchangeable, with Kurenai maybe having a rank edge, which gives her an edge overall, or Anko's statements and techniques kind of give her an edge. I think there's enough discussion here to just give these two kind of a similar spot. I also may lean Kurenai as well, as the first fanbook notes that the Jonin are the heart of the village. These ninja have reached the peak of the shinobi forces through knowledge and courage. So the Leaf Jonin overall are the strongest, but the Tokubetsu Jonin are described to just be specialists with specific jutsu in certain fields, with the entire ranking system of Konoha being noted to be given out based on raw strength and compatibility. At the number 9 spot, we have Baki, who is noted to be one of the strongest Jonin in the Hidden Sand Village and has the feat of catching a body in the form of Hayate, the Proctor, and Tokubetsu Jonin, who was shown using the Konoha style Crescent Moon Dance. There could actually be a case for Gaara making the top 10, ironically at this point in the series, as the first fanbook notes that Gaara hates the world and lives only to kill. His abilities are beyond those of most Chūnin and Jonin. He is extremely dangerous. That just isn't specific enough to really offer Gaara a higher placement on this list. Statements like his hidden power can be considered as the ultimate weapon of Konoha Crush are also clearly in reference to Shikaku. So Baki's placement is kind of just, it's a weird one, but you really don't have that many people. Like, I'm not throwing Rasa in or the 4th Kazekage since we just don't have enough information on him to the point that he's like scalable outside this arc, aside from the fact that he's just would be stronger than other Sand Village shinobi. So if you want to say Rasa would just go up, that still also wouldn't give a definitive answer on where he is in comparison to other Jonin on the list. The best way I could describe this list is now everybody's getting into that Jonin plus range, and now it's better inferences, better statements, better feats that are kind of putting them above one another. So number 1, we have Minato. Number 2, we have Orochimaru and Jiraiya. Number 3, we have Hiruzen. Number 4, we have Kakashi and Kabuto. Number 5, we have Haku. Number 6, we have Guy. Number 7, we have Asuma. Number 8, we have Zabuza. Number 9, we have Anko and Kurenai. And at number 10, we have Baki. The next arc we have is Konoha Crush, ranging from chapters 115 to 138. And it's really interesting to me that one of the shortest arc ranges, or like chapter ranges for an arc, has some of the biggest changes in terms of this list, with a lot of characters just having their spots reaffirmed. Speaking of this, at the number 1 spot, we have the 4th Hokage and Minato again. Now, the reason Minato is kind of persisting at the number 1 spot is that he's basically getting new information each arc that kind of cements him in this location, unlike somebody like Haku per se, who can still be argued to be higher up based on the information we have, but due to a lack of continuance or new information, it gets harder and harder to keep them, or someone like Haku, in that same spot. And in Minato's case, the reason he stays here is because of all the previous information. Nothing really changes in that regard. However, it's further validated via Hiruzen needing to stop the 4th coffin, and heavily implying, just almost outright stating by doing this, that the 4th Hokage is a much bigger threat than the 1st and 2nd. I do want to note that obviously it was never going to work. This is mentioned later in Shippuden, but Hiruzen does actually seem to stop the summon from emerging via Earth style. He just stopped the reanimation. That would never work. But if you're watching part 1, you would assume he stopped the coffin. Like that's what, that's what this scene indicates. This by default already puts Minato above the other Edo Tensei, who were extremely threatening to Hiruzen, along with the statements of him being above the Sannin/Hiruzen tier himself. At the number 2 spot, I actually have 3 characters taking 1 spot, since I think they're all pretty close. At number 2, I have Hiruzen, followed by Orochimaru, followed by Jiraiya, in that order. So if I was going to order them, I would have Hiruzen as the strongest, Orochimaru as the 2nd strongest, and Jiraiya as the 3rd, all within a relative range. I put Hiruzen over the other 2 Sannin due to how his mental afflictions during the fight and his hesitance at killing Orochimaru is a lot more explicit compared to Orochimaru, who stabs his own hand to stop tears from coming out at the prospect of killing his former teacher. Whereas in Hiruzen's case, there's really a moment midway through the fight where Enma kind of questions him, like, what's the matter? This isn't like you. What are you doing, bro? Like, lock in. I'm not saying Orochimaru isn't afflicted or you can't argue that. I'm just saying, based on the information we have right now, it's much more clear that Hiruzen is suffering from this more. Hiruzen even just dwindling his reserves and lowering his lifespan via the Shadow Clone Jutsu, which, fun fact, is the whole reason that Jutsu was sealed to begin with, because dudes were just shortening their lifespans off of making clones. I think generally having Hiruzen with a slight edge, but him relative to Orochimaru at a baseline, is overall the best way to look at it with the context. You're just looking at it through this fight. Hiruzen also has Enma in his arsenal, who is implied to be almost like a partner or like a teammate to him, as they have a long experience of combat noted in the data books, with Enma being noted to be the strongest of all summoning creatures. So you could potentially use that to put him over Gamabunta if you have Gamabunta part of Jiraiya's own arsenal. It's kind of weird to look at it like that, since the summons are kind of their own thing, but at least in Hiruzen's case, I think it could be considered part of his arsenal, since he also uses Adamantine Yoi, which is like a weapon for him. Hiruzen and Orochimaru being at a baseline is pretty consistent as well, since the anime profiles notes that Hiruzen is just equal to Orochimaru, who is disguising himself as the 3rd Kazekage. Or you can look at the fact that Hiruzen, after being resolved to take down Orochimaru and thinking about the villagers, is able to go into a skirmish where it's described the 2 shinobi are equally matched in the first fanbook, with Hiruzen then shortly after disarming, grabbing, and initiating the Reaper Death Seal against Orochimaru. So you have Hiruzen declining during the first portion of the fight via Shadow Clones, dealing with these Edo Tensei fighters, along with these mental restrictions. And then you have him getting slightly resolved, and he can suddenly be equally matched against Orochimaru. So that's kind of why I say this baseline is perfectly fine, but I have Hiruzen at the higher end of it. Orochimaru, I have over Jiraiya, just simply due to the fact that we have more statements. We see that he can make 2 Edo Tensei fighters, potentially 3. So there's more to see from him, which is also why I have him in front of Jiraiya. But Jiraiya should really just be in the same tier based on the statements we have. At the number 3 spot, we actually have Edo Hashirama, who is presented as a pretty big threat in the Hiruzen fight, being able to physically dodge and just tag Hiruzen, whether it be with his physical movements alongside Edo Tobirama or with his wood style where he's able to graze Hiruzen's shoulder. I will note the reason I have Edo Hashirama over Edo Tobirama is that I think saying they're relative in terms of their stats during this fight is fine. It's just that wood style is presented and has better feats than Tobirama's water style, as it's given much more notice in the fight and actually does do far better against Hiruzen, actually trapping and tagging him. Compare this to Tobirama, who Hiruzen has no real problem reacting to jutsu wise and blocking the attack of his water dragon jutsu with his own mud wall, which is still impressive. I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but Hashirama is just presented as a lot stronger. He's also the one to use Bringer of Darkness in the manga. You know, Hashirama and Tobirama both do it in the anime. It's a really weird thing to get into because Hashirama has Yang release, Tobirama is the one with Yin release, yet Hashirama is the one who uses a shadow style jutsu. So kind of a weird thing, but if you also want to throw it in and look at manga continuity only, that is something that Hashirama himself has under his belt as well. At the number 4 slot, we have Edo Tobirama. He's really here for the same reasons as Hashirama. He's able to contend with Hiruzen, has relative stats to Hashirama to where they're pretty much performing the same physically. It's really their jutsu that kind of make up the difference. Tobirama's water style is very impressive. It's actually Hokage level, at least in the mind of Orochimaru. Also being able to overwhelm Hiruzen's flame bombs, which are noted to be one of his more prized jutsu. Again, elemental matchup, but it just still is good stock, as it's not like every regular water style shinobi is going to have Hokage level water style. I also will note, I just mentioned the mud wall point previously, but an interesting point is that when you actually see Tobirama's water style hit the mud wall still cracks and does have visible damage. So Tobirama is very impressive, even in this Edo Tensei form. I will also note that elemental matchups really haven't been made apparent at this point in the series, so you may actually just be able to make more inferences based on this. I just more so threw those in as like supplementary discussion. Next up, we have Kabuto and Kakashi, and there's literally no information that changes. All we see is like an interaction between Kabuto and Kakashi where Kabuto kind of snides that Kakashi hasn't mastered his Sharingan, but other than that, we just don't have enough to make any placement changes or make any inferences. So we're going to just go past this number 5 tier. Number 6, we have Haku. Again, nothing really crazy. A lot of the same information, a lot of the same arguments. I'm not going to waste your time by going over it again. Number 7, we have Guy. Guy remains the same spot for a lot of the similar reasons. You have additional statements such as Guy shows a glimpse of power comparable to Kakashi's, which further pushes the narrative that he's somewhat of a pseudo Kakashi rival or just Kakashi rival in general during the leaf, maybe a bit closer to Kakashi than the likes of Asuma. This also making the implication that Guy's gated form is more so what's closer to Kakashi than his base form. Number 8, we have Asuma for all the same reasons. Number 9, we have Zabuza for all of the same reasons. Number 10, we have Kurenai and Anko. Asuma and Guy versus Zabuza is really just based on your interpretation of Zabuza versus Kakashi and how far Zabuza really pushed Kakashi, or how much of a percentage of Kakashi's full power Zabuza really is. I have Guy and Asuma over as they have more solid metrics, but if you have Zabuza over those two or somewhere in the middle, I would not fault you. So the list is changed again. We have Minato, Hiruzen, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, then Hashirama, Tobirama, Kabuto, Kakashi, Haku, Guy, Asuma, Zabuza, Kurenai, and Anko. Thank God bless Baki's out the list. I'm sorry he had to be there before. I didn't want to. Yo, there's like no characters in part 1. Also, side note, if you were going to throw the Kazekage on this list, he would probably be somewhere arbitrarily below the Sannin or Hiruzen himself, as we just know that Hiruzen implies he's stronger, as he's like, my head won't roll off as easily, and we just know that Orochimaru had killed him or was masquerading as him. So there's no real metric to say how much stronger he would be than other Leaf Jonin or other characters, but just a side note, he would be on there. Same thing with Shikaku. If you wanted to throw him in during this arc, he would probably just be under the Sannin as well, especially if you include the Sannin summons like Gamabunta and Jiraiya being one package deal. He would just be above that, especially if you consider the likes of Edo Tensei a weapon. You may be able to imply Shikaku would just be above the likes of Edo Hashirama or Edo Tobirama. The next arc we have is Search for Tsunade, which ranges from chapters 139 to 171. Now, This is where the good stuff happens, man. I have been waiting for this arc. This is where we really get some definitive placements, and this is where the tier list kind of solidifies quite a bit. At the number 1 spot, Minato, no change. Like, there's the least amount of change. The only real additional information is the conversation Jiraiya and Tsunade have, where Jiraiya points out how everybody had just pales in comparison to Lord Fourth, as a shinobi his capacity was unparalleled, a true one of a kind, which just further cements his placement. It doesn't really change anything about the tiering. All of Minato's stuff is really just compounding over time with like 1 or 2 additional statements, feats, whatever, that just kind of cement him at the number 1 spot. So don't really want to stick on Minato. He's not going anywhere. Dead as fuck. He's not even in the series, but he's still here. I don't know how, but anyway, yeah, we're gonna keep it moving. At the number 2 slot, we have Itachi Uchiha. Now, when I was envisioning this video and like kind of scripting it out and stuff like that, I already knew this was going to be one of the weirder placements to talk about with all the information we have on Itachi at this point in the series. Let's talk about the Aura Goblin himself. Also, the Akatsuki robes in part 1 only have 1 sleeve. Is that not weird to y'all? That's weird. I was looking at that. In the original manga, in part 1, they literally only have 1 sleeve. I thought it was just Kisame, but nah, Itachi has that same thing. I guess Kishi didn't discover the design yet. Like the video too. How far in and you haven't liked it, bro? You out here, you know, scrubbing dishes, driving on, you know, am I in your pocket? What's going, like, am I crazy? Anyway, let's get into this section. Itachi's feats during the Search for Tsunade arc are pretty outstanding. He goes on to make the peak of Konoha, that being Kakashi, look like an absolute child, as even Kakashi Sharingan can't follow the speed of Itachi's hand seals. He's also shown just absolutely dominating Kurenai, who's noted to be at the top of the Leaf Village in terms of Genjutsu. And I know a lot of people meme Kurenai, but she actually does catch Kisame and Itachi under Genjutsu, with Itachi just reflecting it back. So Konoha Jonin really aren't that threatening to Itachi. The main bread and butter of this discussion is how Itachi stacks up to the Sannin. We essentially have 2 main statements that people use. We have the statement of Itachi just outright being stronger than the likes of Orochimaru. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind with this statement is that we don't know what the fight looked like at this point in the series. All we know is that there is the implication that a fight took place due to Itachi being the reason Orochimaru broke away from the Akatsuki organization. We don't know how much stronger Itachi is than Orochimaru, just enough to where he didn't think he could try him, or that dream had just died, so he had to go after Sasuke. The other main statement that relates Itachi to the Sannin is Kisame's statement, where I don't know if I'd be able to take him on. You can. I'm not so sure about me. In which Itachi remarks, quote, "Yeah, if we faced off, we might end up killing each other. At the very least, we'd hurt each other badly. And even if I had more backup, it probably wouldn't change the outcome." Kisame follows suit by discussing how the titles of Konoha's Uchiha clan and 7 Ninja Swordsmen of the Mist just pale in comparison to the Big 3 or the Konoha legend. And Itachi kind of remarks with this, like, yeah, however, even the strongest heroes have their weaknesses. So it's a really ambiguous statement, and what you're left with, you have 1 positive statement in Itachi's favor and 1 neutral one against Jiraiya. And if you actually look at Itachi's statement, he doesn't really give absolutes. He just says we might end up killing each other. And the note about him having more backup, the way I interpret that is that Itachi and Jiraiya are so strong that even if more Akatsuki members showed up, it wouldn't really change the outcome. Generally meaning that they wouldn't be relevant enough in the battle to make an impact on the outcome or whatever happened. If you want my personal opinion, the way Itachi's portrayed in part 1, he's mainly portrayed as to have like Tsukiyomi and Amaterasu, these hard-hitting jutsu, but he has stamina issues after using them. Like, he's physically huffing and puffing after his bout with Kakashi and against Jiraiya, where he knows he wants to rest his eyes. This is where Orochimaru not giving context to the encounter does matter, because it could present the idea that it was a higher diff fight and Itachi's just still stronger than Orochimaru. The Toad Mouthbind feat isn't really that good in my opinion to use over Itachi as well, as Kisame's the one who's noticeably sweating on panel. Itachi's the one who busts through the wall, and Kisame kind of questions Itachi after. He's like, why did we have to retreat with your power? Despite knowing what the Sannin is capable of and having a good strength read on Jiraiya, he still questions why they retreated. In which Itachi remarks that he has used him Tsukiyomi and Amaterasu, so he has to rest his body. With the physical stamina point I mentioned earlier, along with Kisame noting you don't want to overuse those eyes, you know that's dangerous. So it's generally presented that Itachi is someone who can beat a Sannin. It's just generally a high diff fight for him that fatigues him and may risk his eyes. At least that's the way I see it. I want to point out that this also does kind of play into how Kishimoto portrays character strengths in part 1, where certain jutsu just make characters really strong. Like Haku's Kekkei Genkai makes him insanely strong. So Itachi having Tsukiyomi, which is noted in the data book to be feared as the most powerful genjutsu, or Amaterasu and how it burns for 7 days and 7 nights. Like, Kishimoto low-key has characters being strong stat-wise, but then certain jutsu will just elevate them crazy high. And the Toad Mouthbind feat doesn't really shoot Jiraiya up either, as he notes it actually took him a huge effort, somewhat implying that the Toad Mouthbind is just a higher level jutsu from him. So it's for these reasons I have Itachi over the Sannin. I'm also going to talk about why it's kind of impossible to put one Sannin over the other, which is why you really can't put any of the Sannin or Hiruzen above Itachi, at least in my opinion, based on the information we have. At the number 3 spot, we have Hiruzen, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade. I know this is kind of cheating by having these guys in one spot, but realistically, the reason they're here is kind of just the same. It doesn't really change too much. Hiruzen's here with a reputation that regards him as being the strongest of the 5 shadows, which doesn't really mean anything unless you throw Rasa in this discussion. It just doesn't, you don't have any of the other shadows as reference to kind of use. Orochimaru's here for a lot of the same reasons as well. The Fanbook 1 statement remarking Orochimaru is the most dangerous and strongest of all village enemies only really works in comparison to the villains or enemies introduced in Data Book 1, such as Haku, Zabuza, etc. The Akatsuki have not been introduced in the series, and the cutoff point for Data Book 1 is the Konoha Crush, so it can't really be used to put Orochimaru over Itachi. I generally have Orochimaru over Jiraiya in this arc, generally due to him just performing better. The two are very comparable with their respective nerfs. Orochimaru kind of implies that it's no contest even with their nerfs, but we do see that he actually does take damage off screen. There's more blood on his face. So the gap probably isn't huge. I just favor Orochimaru due to the fact that he's actually able to knock out Jiraiya during the fight, grabbing his foot with his tongue and slamming him, kind of knocking him out for a moment while he's able to go fight Tsunade. So because they performed relative, but Orochimaru still does have that knockout feat, I just lean towards him generally, followed by Jiraiya, followed by Tsunade. Tsunade also is nerfed during this encounter. She has her fear of blood, which is something that was a big detriment to her, along with the fact that she had lost her Will of Fire, something that the data book notes pretty explicitly and something she gains back after the fight. Specifically remarking, she who was adulated as the Sannin, the strongest ninja who put fear into the hearts of enemies far away, is once more revived. The first fanbook also noting she is the strongest kunoichi of the history of Konoha, who owned wisdom and courage that equals Jiraiya and Orochimaru. This couple of things like Ibisu noting only another of the legendary 3 can stop Orochimaru, with Tsunade also growing in strength after leaving the village, at least, somewhat to the point where she can use mitotic regeneration. In a similar manner, Orochimaru notes that it seems I'm not the only one who's developed new jutsu, so they're all nerfed, but they've also grown from their time away from the village. This along with the fact that their summons kind of stalemate and a deadlock as well. Summons also noted to be relative to one another, kind of just paints the 3 as just in the same tier, and you can't really argue it around. I do think, however, the order based on the information we have is Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and then Tsunade. At the number 4 slot, we have Edo Hashirama for the exact same reasons. Literally nothing changes. He's just very threatening and able to oppose a Sannin tier level opponent. Number 5, we have Edo Tobirama for the exact same reason. Just not quite as strong as Edo Hashirama, but still comparable from a stat perspective and just has really strong ninjutsu. At the number 6 slot, we have Kakashi and Kabuto. A lot of the same reasonings as before, only we have additional statements for Kabuto, which may put him ahead as Kakashi. Jiraiya really notes that he's just on the same level as Kakashi, which kind of depends because he hasn't seen Kakashi in a minute, so he may even be using a stronger version of Kakashi as a metric, or he'll just be using the Kakashi he had the conversation with in Konoha, which was the one that kind of had gone through a bit of training. Kabuto also displays really good feats, being able to take on the less, the sub-Sannin version of Tsunade, who honestly being like at the top of Konoha, even when you're physically restricted, just been gambling for your entire years on end, tricking yourself in a hole and just wandering around. It's still pretty impressive. Now, Tsunade does kind of note that Kabuto's jutsu instincts and sharpness surpass her in her own prime. Kabuto being able to fight with his body controls being reversed and completely swapped up, along with being able to create a chakra scalpel that can attack Tsunade internally. He's just overall shown very impressive. The Naruto Chronicler Guide also notes that Kabuto's skill is on par with Kakashi, so the two's relativity or just comparisons continue to get drawn. If anything, there might be more of a basis to put Kabuto over Kakashi, but I still favor Kakashi, especially since they have a brief conversation during Konoha Crush where Kabuto doesn't even want to show Kakashi jutsu, just off of the idea Kakashi might copy it with his Sharingan. So I still have Kakashi generally, but I think they're very close. Kakashi's also remaining this, his statements continue, although he's not really bound to that strongest in Konoha statement, as that's Data Book 1. He still has great statements across the board, like his speed being top class among the Jonins. We also get other statements from other characters that do imply Kakashi's still at the peak of Konoha, or at the upper echelon, even past that Data Book 1 statement. At the number 7 spot, we have Might fight Guy. I have been waiting for this, bro. So Guy is rather interesting in this scenario because he actually gets amped quite a bit from the new stuff we're introduced to. The main stock increase for Guy is based on what happens with Kisame and Itachi, where first of all, the whole aura of the battlefield changed. Let's just start right there. Like when Guy pulled up, the energy changed. Everything, like it was a completely different conversation. We see him kick away Kisame, which on its own isn't really that crazy, especially since we see a weaker or similar level Jonin like Asuma actually graze Kisame's cheek and weave away from Samehada's sword swing. So nothing that doesn't really offer that much. What's much more impressive is Itachi making notes to Kisame not to underestimate Guy. This is important because he makes no such notes about Kurenai or Asuma, who he knows Kisame is directly going to battle. He actually tells Kisame not to go all out or just not to go too crazy against them. But when he talks about Guy and Kakashi, he's very explicit. When discussing Kakashi, Itachi makes a note to Kisame, do not fight him, you won't get away scot-free or uninjured. He's like, you didn't come here to get injured. Making a similar note about Guy, who Kisame should not underestimate. This coupled with the Dad Book 2 statement, which remarks, even Itachi Uchiha retreats in front of Guy's combat skills, which is crazy stock. Now, obviously, it wouldn't put Guy above Itachi, as even if you look at the context of the conversation and what we know, Itachi doesn't like to use his MS techniques, or they're very draining, and he doesn't want to risk overusing his eyes, right? But this still is really good stock for Guy, especially since the data books make explicit notes that Itachi is somebody just far above Kisame, who's in awe of Itachi's power, which you could also just derive from their like the talks they have, like Kisame being like, why do we have to retreat with your power? Or you might be able to go head to head with Jiraiya, but I can't. So having these statements made about Guy just from Itachi of all people, with the data book supplementing it, is enough to put him over the other Jonin who really just don't have those same statements. All of the reasons listed previously for Itachi, along with the fact that Guy lists off that he knows how to counter the Sharingan via combat, does kind of lead into Itachi's retreat. At the number 8 spot, we have Kisame Hoshigaki. Now, the thing about Kisame in this situation is that I know this seems low, but you got to keep in mind, in part 1, Kisame's feats really aren't that good. He's kind of comparable, or being like, all of the Jonin are able to combat him. So he goes from like, you know, being caught in Genjutsu by Kurenai. Asuma is able to dodge Samehada's swings and just graze Kisame. Kakashi's Shadow Clone is able to clash evenly with Kisame's water style jutsu. Although I will note, Itachi does kind of say don't go too crazy, which you can maybe say is implying Kisame's holding back to an extent, but it still is kind of ridiculous. This coupled with the Guy stuff I just mentioned kind of paints Kisame in a weird place. And it's kind of weird, like low-key, how this guy goes from just like rivaling a Kakashi Shadow Clone, being comparable to like part 1 Asuma, to needing to have Guy go into the 6th gate in Shippuden to beat 30% of his chakra. You know, it's kind of it's kind of an insane leap, I'm not gonna lie. So there's no real higher place you could put him. Kisame is also just distinctly below Itachi. The data books make note of this, along with being below the Sannin tier via his own self-admissions. The statements Guy gets are crazy enough, and you can just kind of extrapolate them a certain type of way to generally have him over Kisame. Kisame is also just, you know, to add to like him being below the Sannin or that tier, or him not even touching it or being close to it. Jiraiya is able to block him with just the small toad, like the small toad pulls up and blocks Kisame's swing, or he's able to restrain Kisame when he goes up for a charge against Naruto. So like Kisame just doesn't have good stock against the Sannin in part 1. At the number 9 spot, we have Haku. Again, nothing really that crazy here. Most of the people here are just scaling to Kakashi, or are very close to Kakashi's level, or just have higher inferences you can make. So Haku like everybody kind of in this tier now is almost Kakashi level, or just at that level, or can just combat Kakashi. At the number 10 spot, we have Asuma, who is just able to fight Kisame. I don't think he's quite as strong as Kisame is more so comparable to that Kakashi and Guy tier, along with the fact that Kisame does do better than Asuma in their clash, as he's able to graze his arm compared to his cheek getting grazed. And even then, you can be kind of generous to Kisame and say he wasn't aware of Asuma extending the chakra to his blades, which is what grazed his cheek. This, along with Asuma's previous feats, just generally put him here. I think there's not enough to suggest Asuma is still stronger than the beginning of part 1 Kakashi, since, like I mentioned earlier, we don't know how much stronger Kakashi got, if at all, when Itachi's making this metric, if he's talking about current Kakashi or just like last time he saw him, all that jazz. So the order this time around is Minato at number 1, Itachi Uchiha at number 2. At number 3, 4-way deadlock between Hiruzen Orochimaru, Jiraiya, Tsunade. Number 4, Edo Hashirama. Number 5, Edo Tobirama. Number 6, we have a tie between Kakashi and Kabuto. Number 7, we have Guy. Number 8, we have Kisame. Number 9, we have Haku. And number 10, we have Asuma. Next up, we have Sasuke Retreival, which does not have enough for me to really feel like I want to change too many placements or shuffle people around on this list. The best feat, in my opinion, to compare to the Jonin tier is potentially the Sound 4, who are noted in the Ninja Chronicler guide to be as strong as Leaf Jonin, although I will make a distinct note that this is somewhat mitigated by the fact that they're kind of tied out, or they have a like 10 out of 10 high diff fight where their bodies can't move for a while, via having a very high difficulty fight against Genma and Raido, who were returning from a mission out of Chakra, although they do distinctly note that a team of Jonin should be sent against the Sound 4. Low-key, this statement's probably referencing Leaf Jonin as a whole and not maybe the Ninja Proctors that we've seen, or, you know, just some general tier of Leaf Jonin. I will also note the only real, like, higher level showing feat is just Naruto and Sasuke clashing, which the chakra of it kind of alarms Kakashi, along with the fact that Sasuke post his final fight with Naruto can kind of chakra flex and aura. You know, he kind of scares Kabuto, who's like, what's this chakra? There's only one individual who I really see just kind of making the list, or could have made the list. His name rhymes with goat and ends in Kimimaru. We're gonna talk about him in my honorable mentions. There's a pretty distinct reason why I didn't put him on, but if you were gonna throw him in, he could range from being above Edo Hashirama to just being below Edo Tobirama, due to the statements about how it would have made the Hokage assassination go much more smoothly. This, coupled with the Strongest Warriors editorial statement when discussing Gaara and Kimimaru, kind of sets up a weird predicament. I do think that statement's generally in reference to everybody on the mission, so Kimimaru and Gaara are kind of unrivaled in that aspect, but Kimimaru's statements in the data books are just insane. Like, they remark him having like the ultimate Kekkei Genkai. He's just, it's mind-boggling. So he's clearly hyped up. It's just, you know, sick Kimimaru is kind of not really usable. So Sasuke Retrieval just kind of gets a pass. Nothing's going to change. We're just going to get into Kakashi Gaiden towards the end of part 1 rankings. Now, before I give off the final rankings with Kakashi Gaiden, I wanted to throw in some honorable mentions. For the summons or beasts, we have Shikaku, the Ninetales, Gemabunta, Katsuyu, and Manda, all of which would have been dominating this top 10 off their feats in the show or the statements made about them. All of the Sannin summons are demonstrated to be somewhat comparable to the Sannin themselves. This may be being noted of Jiraiya kind of saying Gemabunta is even difficult for him to deal with, or Kabuto noting that it's extremely risky summoning Manda, and maybe implies like Manda might be able to just eat him and Orochimaru, and he might turn against them, which would just be really bad. Rasa, I mentioned previously, is an honorable mention. Probably the last 2 honorable mentions I have are Prime Kimimaru and a more Prime Hiruzen. For Prime Hiruzen, I'm referencing the version that Orochimaru references, who's like 10 years younger, who probably would have just won that fight when discussing the Reaper Death Seal clash. If you threw these guys in, my updated list would probably look a lot crazier. I just didn't really throw them in because if you make inferences for certain people, you kind of have to do it for others. So I just didn't think there was enough to really give them a concrete spot, more of a range for these characters. But I do want to note that these characters would also be on the top 10. The final arc we have is Kakashi Gaiden, which ranges from chapters 239 to 244. There isn't insane changes. The main thing is just Minato with the introduction of the Flying ThunderGod technique, which is swiftness that surpasses Body Flicker. Body Flicker in general just being high speed movement amped by chakra. It's not a really crazy technique. It's more of a C rank jutsu, with this outright surpassing it and being much closer to the summoning jutsu, as it's just teleportation, space-time ninjutsu. You can couple this with the chapter statement noting Minato has unrivaled strength as just further cement in like the coffin that Minato's #1 still. At the #2 spot, I actually have Tsukumo Hatake. Now, this might come as a surprise, but this is one of the only changes Kakashi Gaiden really introduces, which it regards Sakumo as, in his time, the 3 great shinobi of Konoha legend paled beside him. The databook supplementing this by noting, in front of his skills, it is said that even the Sannin's names would have been overshadowed, and Kakashi flows the blood of a great hero. The White Fang is pretty ridiculous with these assertions. You can make the argument it's rather general. However, the fact that it's referencing the Sannin, all 3 of them, is pretty ridiculous. Even Orochimaru kind of makes a similar note when he's fighting 2 of the same Sannin. He's like, it's kind of expected. Fighting 2 of the great 3 is a bit much, which is kind of crazy stock if you think about it. The reason I also think you can put Sakumo over Itachi is generally due to how Itachi in part 1 is presented to where the Sannin are like a below him, but they're a high diff fight for him, whereas Sakumo is just outright beyond the group as a whole. The statements are crazy enough to where you actually can just put him outright above Itachi, and it's not really that ridiculous based on what we know about Itachi and how he's probably not that far above the Sannin based on what we know at this moment. So the White Fang snipes the #2 spot. At #3, we have Itachi Uchiha, all of the same reasons, man. Like, nothing changes. #4, Jiraiya Hiruzen Orochimaru Tsunade. I mean, this one's blatant. You guys just heard me give a spiel. I mean, statements like, are the only ones who can fight against the Sannin are the Sannin themselves, question mark. I think it's pretty blatant that the Sannin just have their own tier. The only thing that might change some things or maybe put Hiruzen back is the statement at the end of the dictionary in Data Book 2, which remarks, the legendary 3 shinobi, the 3 ninja who once boasted a strength approaching that of the Hokage in the village, Jiraiya and Orochimaru were one of them, which I think just means that they were improving rapidly during their village time, which adds into why Hiruzen really thought Orochimaru might have beaten him. I don't have the Sannin order changing since we also find out that Orochimaru just beats Jiraiya, or it's implied Jiraiya couldn't stop him in a similar fashion to how Naruto couldn't stop Sasuke. So I don't really see a need to change the order that much. Number 5, we have Edo Hashirama. Number 6, we have Edo Tobirama. Number 7, we have Kakashi and Kabuto. Number 8, we have Might Guy. Number 9, we have Kisame. Number 10, we have Haku. This is my final tier list for the power rankings. I do want to note that I think the Jonin generally are really interchangeable, but these are just my reasonings. You kind of have to find a consistency and stick with it, because one placement on this list, even at the beginning, changes the list for like future arcs and stuff like that. This video was probably one of the more challenging videos I've had to do. I swear to God, I'm not gonna do a part 2 or part 3 if y'all don't gas this video up. So like this bitch up, bro. Like this was tough, man. This was a tough ass video. I'm sweating. I'm sweating while recording this, bro. So if you guys want the part 2, which I mean, this video was what, like, I think it's coming close to an hour. Imagine what some of the Shippuden stuff's gonna be. So if you guys want it, you gotta show it. You know what I'm saying? I cannot do another one of these videos if it doesn't pop off. So let me know what you guys think. If you enjoyed the video, all that good stuff. Hopefully you did. Take some, take some happiness in my suffering. But yeah, I'll catch you. Bye.